I had the pleasure of sitting down with Dick Piazza, author, educator, and life coach. And Dick is a lifelong storyteller. He has over 4 decades of experience in education, literature, and personal growth. Dick actually started writing in his 80s, and he has published 6 works up to date. This conversation was filled with reflection of his purpose and passion and how much he loves to connect with people and how much they love to connect with him. It's very evident through this beautiful conversation. I know you're going to enjoy this show. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of It's Messy, but It's So Good. And today my guest is Dick Piazza, author, educator, and life coach. And Dick is another wonderful creative person living in our community. And it seems like I'm so lucky to come across so many people in our community that are doing very creative, interesting things with their life and their passion. So welcome, Dick.
Thank you. Morning.
Good morning. So what I would love to start off with is, I know you have a career that is probably over 40 years. And you've done many different things. I know that you were teaching for many years, but if you could take us through the process of, your passion and your journey and ending up where we are now in the present time.
It's a long story.
Yes.
Longer than 40 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. It all has to do with, with the benefit of hindsight. It all has to do with the first realization I had that I was in essence a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
That word had never been proposed to me before until I was ready to drop out of college because I had been placed in college as an accounting major. And I was ready to blow my brains out. As you can imagine. I went to the guidance counselor at Fairleigh Dickinson and said, I need to get out of here. I'm having migraine headaches and going nuts. And he made me take a long test that the University of Chicago had produced at the time that spoke to my basic attributes rather than academic stuff. And 2 weeks later, told me that, laughingly, that I couldn't possibly have chosen a worse major. And he had 3 suggestions for me. He said, what the test suggests about your personality is that you ought to be a priest or a minister, a personnel director, or a teacher. And when he said teacher, I said, well, I know I can do that. Yes, that was a complete natural sense. And all the rest followed from that moment. I changed majors and found that college was a joy and that my passion had been ignited in a way that I don't think I ever had experienced it before. And off I went. So the rest of it has to do with all of the forms that passion of teaching eventually took in my life. As I look back, but probably everything I've done has been fueled by that passion to teach. So the career that you just referred to has always one way or another flirted with and engaged the act of teaching, working with others, a great passion for young people, and later on for struggling people. I work with a lot of people from AA and today, and a lot of adults who are not in AA, but struggling to find some meaning in their life. And I find that's a natural environment for me, that I arrive in that environment with a great deal of comfort and ease and something very natural that seems to come over me, allowing me to be a good listener, compassionate listener, which is key, to be non-judgmental, to remember that there's a person behind the voice speaking to me who's gone through life and is struggling, and not feeling I have answers for anybody, but that I am in touch with a process, communication, that by its nature allows people to self-discover. And that's great joy for me. I had a session yesterday, and a woman looked up at me and she said, I just figured something out about myself that I've never thought of. And it wasn't because I told her that. It was that it came out of the process. Those are the moments of joy for me that in my coaching aspect are just unbeatable, in a sense of gratitude that I could play a role in life that could support other folks in self-understanding, self-growth, and find their own wisdom. We all have it. And just a question of being in a safe setting where you're free to explore without worrying about getting hammered over the head by someone who's disapproving. So my whole teaching career, I just explained it to you. I mean, my whole teaching career has rested on those principles. In the beginning, I was in the process of discovering them myself.
Right.
And knowing what it was that ignited me, what brought me to life. And then once I began to see what worked with me, I naturally started using as many of those things as possible in the classroom and elsewhere. So that career, which involves elementary school kids in the beginning and a whole bunch of years in high school, and then some college teaching, a stint in Great Britain where I lived and studied in experimental schools. And then about 12 years of very concentrated research and brain research and how the brain and learning work together. And then I created workshops that I took on the road and across the United States and taught teacher groups and principals some of the brain research that I was discovering and searching for ways that it spoke to how we run schools, right from the administrative level all the way down to what happens in the individual classroom. Those were very successful and they were joyful. And from that came a lot of the work that I've done in my coaching. Because the last analysis, when we work with each other, we're working with each other's brains. And so that knowledge and that evolving sense of understanding that we have, even though we're still at the tip of an iceberg when it comes to the brain, was really revealing to me and allowed me to be in a place. I like to say, where am I standing here? Where is my stand? And that position that I'm in has affected all aspects of my life, from my relationship with Terry, to the kids that I taught, to the people I counsel now, to friendships that I have over a cup of coffee at the Village Buzz.
Yeah.
Wherever I go, these discoveries that somehow filtered through into me has allowed me to be present. And when I am present in the way I can be, strangely, or maybe not so strangely, people want to be with me. They want to sit down, have a cup of coffee. And I say very little. I ask a couple of questions and shut my mouth and listen. And off they go. Folks have a lot of things to say, and they don't often find a willing listener. This is a very busy world.
Yeah.
And we say, how you doing? But we don't really care. I do, and I never say that without meaning it. So it seems that I found a place of need for myself as well as for lots of folks that I encounter. Um, and so this has been a joyful ride for me almost all the way because I've always been, and I say this to the folks I coach, that I am very lucky because the way I have spent my life, and this wasn't all intentional and purposeful because I was just following my gut, but the way I've spent my life has been probably 99% doing the things that I'm passionate about. And I learned by looking up at the world that lots of folks are not that lucky. They're stuck in jobs that they don't like, or they don't have a job, or they don't have a purpose. And having a purpose for me is everything. When I get up in the morning, I need to know why I'm here and what I'm doing and why. And that my actual life allows me to express that every day. I mean, this can't get any better. So sitting here on this hill, looking at this lake and this mountain, is just one part of how things are in my life right now that really need to be in my life. And as a result, it frees me to be the best Dick Piazza I can be. Faulty as that may be, it's the best I've got that I could bring out and communicate. And one of my rules of being a human being is that anytime I get any kind of knowledge, my first instinct is to give it away, not to hold on to it. I think of it in terms of the movement of current. The Dead Sea is dead because nothing's coming in and nothing's going out. I don't want to be a Dead Sea collecting, erudite information and knowledge and feel special and powerful. I want it to go right out. So it flows through me. So if I learn something from a book I'm reading or from some research I'm doing, I just can't wait to share it with Carrie or one of my clients or anyone at the coffee table. These are the things of life that generate life in me every day. And why would I want to hold on to them? So that's essentially how I live, and it's how I write.
Mm-hmm.
So my first book was Everyday Epiphanies. I don't know if you want to get into that.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to know more
Yeah.
about your life
Yeah.
as an author.
Yeah. There's a continuum, of course, in my writing as well as in my life, and it's always easier to see the patterns from when you're older and looking back. But the first book, and by the way, all the books I've published, all 5 of them, have been done in my 80s. I didn't publish anything before then. I was writing and doing a lot of stuff, but in the last decade, I have put out 5 books, and I guess that was when I was ready to do it. I don't for sure. But the first book, Everyday Epiphanies, I'm a student of James Joyce and have studied Joyce here and abroad with some of the best scholars in Joyce scholarship. And he's found his way inside my molecules. And there's a sense that I have, as he did, that everything in life is worth paying attention to. It was one of the things he said to a colleague. That struck me years ago. And because I would have breakfast almost every day at the Buzz in my retirement, people started wandering across my life. And they would come to the table and we'd have a normal greeting. And over time, I noticed that they were hanging around longer than they even wanted to. They were on their way to work or to pick somebody up. And I would ask them, "Yeah, do you want to sit down?" And they would say no, and then they would sit down. This is really funny. And that scene is captured in one of the dialogues that I wrote in my second book, where people say no, but they really want something, and perhaps don't know exactly what, and neither do I. But there they are. And because I had trained myself to listen, they are suddenly in the company of somebody who's looking them in the eye and paying attention, which is startling, to say the least, for many. You could almost see it happen. And the next thing that happens is that they begin talking and they start opening up. And with very little effort on my side, they need to tell somebody something. And they start. Some of the most hardened people I've ever met, ex-motorcycle cops from New York City who have been fired from their jobs because they're bipolar, sitting with me, asking for a hug. Uh-huh. Where does that come from? And then telling me their story, often awful stories about contentious households and harmful traumas and parents and failed marriages and so many things that that they need to say. And I just listened. Eventually, I got their permission to write, of course, anonymously about some of these things. But this started happening at the Buzz, one person after another, after another. And one of the thoughts I had, and I didn't know I was planning a book at the time, but one of the thoughts I had is that by listening compassionately, I began to see through the veil of the external self and immediately start seeing, something much deeper, much more profound that began to show up, which is, I think, what people want to show up but are afraid to allow it to be seen. And as those essences, as I called them at the time, started revealing themselves, I thought, that's what I want to write about. I thought, I need to capture that essence, not anything else. All the rest of the stuff is just cosmetics. But that core self that began to reveal itself was fascinating to me. And I was learning something from it about struggle and about decisions and about pain and about joy. And so I thought, I'm going to write very short pieces, which I call epiphanies, maybe 5-10 lines long. This is how I started out. And in those 10 lines, I was going to attempt the best of my ability to capture that essence in that person. Not by specifically talking about them, but about the essence. So the essence became the subject of the piece. I ended up writing 40 or 50 of them over a period of a year. And all of them, or most of them, from people who just wandered in, sat down, and then wandered in another day and sat down and little by little shared their truth with me. And then I would write the poem about them and polish it up and get it right. And then I wouldn't do anything with it until I gave it to them and had them look at it and say, this is what I wrote because of our conversations. What do you think? And they would look at me, often in tears, and say, how did you know? I said, you told me. So I knew I was on the right track. And so I produced the book, which is, for the most part, a collection of these epiphanies. I even did a few of my cats, and I did some with folks that I've known all my life. So it's a collection of my journey inward with a lot of very interesting people who didn't think they were interesting and whose lives they thought were banal, but saw in my little epiphany that there was something very special about them, something that glowed, shined, that was just them, very special. So the first book became that, essentially. It's mostly that. There are a couple of short essays in it as well. And I was kind of off and running. I published that book and then thought, yeah, I can be a writer. Why not? I was my own worst block in that matter. what do I have to say that's worth anybody paying attention to anyway, kind of thing. Well, many people say. We all think we have nothing to offer, but we
Which
all
is
do.
exactly what they were
Yes,
reflecting to you.
exactly. I think that's what drew me to it. That yeah, we all have a unique story. We're the only one of us in the universe, so we do have a story to tell. And if it's honest, it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be profound, even because it will talk of very deep things. I'm terrible at small talk, and this allowed me to have deep conversations with many, many people, which was wonderful for both of us, especially for me, because that's the way I want to be in this world. I don't want to be talking about trivialities. There's way too much of that going on. I want to be in a real place with the real people speaking their real truth. So that was the first book. I had written a lot of short stories in the past that remained in file cabinets that I always promised myself I would take a look at and edit and so forth, but I hadn't. But now that I was an author, it was a big deal, right? I'm an author, I have a book. So I thought, well, maybe I can incorporate some of those stories into a new book. But that was hard, and I put it off for a while. But I decided that where I was really at the time was paying a lot of attention to trauma and reading a lot about it, researching a lot about it, and beginning to identify in my own life that which was traumatic for me, that I had really never faced and dealt with in any concrete way. I was wondered why I was such a strange bird, and what led me on the path that I ended up, which was so unlike my beginnings. I came from a almost illiterate family, no books in the house ever. So where did I come from? You know, what created this creature? And so I started a long journey of self-learning, self-identification, exploring my past to see, how I pieced together the person that was to become me, knowing so little. And I realized as I did that inner search that I had in my life, luckily, encountered at least two mentors who walked into my life at exactly the right moment. One when I was just barely a teenager and totally lost. And the other was a friend, a naturalist, who took me on long hikes in the woods and taught me the names of trees and animals and how to be quiet and listen. And these mentors opened doors for me that I've never gone back out of. And so I thought, well, maybe what I ought to be doing is writing a coming of age piece that talked about how I unfolded as a person. And so I started with a poem called Little Boy, which opens the second book, which is called Crazy Quilt. Crazy Quilt is a name I got from history. At the end of the 20th century, 1900s, I'm sorry, in the 19th century, and the end of the 1800s in Great Britain, there was a great craze going on of pottery coming from ideas from Japan, in which they would take pieces of glass and adhere them to vases and other things, and they had this crazy pattern to them. That led in Great Britain to a craze in piecing together remnants of cloth and thread and patches of clothing that were to be tossed away, and creating quilts out of these otherwise unrelated pieces of fabric and even other materials. and just sewing them together, and they would be used as lap blankets. But they were called crazy quilts, and the crazy quilts idea resonated with me because as I was reading, thinking about my life, I thought, yeah, that's my life. All these crazy pieces that are suddenly getting glued together in something that would become me. And I didn't know it at the time because they were just crazy pieces, but eventually, those pieces started shaping themselves into a form, like the quilt. And so I thought, well, that might be a good name for a book. I don't know in a consumer sense whether it was a great name because most people pass it by thinking it's a book about quilting. So I probably, if I had an advisor at the time, he probably would have told me, that's great. I get the idea, but that's a stupid title. But it's my title. So Crazy Quilt is the longest book, and it starts with this coming of age story. There's a poem called Triple Play, which I love, which speaks to one of the traumatic areas of my life. I spent a lot of time playing baseball as a kid, and it was a passion of mine. It was also an escape from an unpredictable world.
Mm-hmm.
It had rules, and there were no good guys and bad guys. And when you lost a game, there was always going to be another game. And when you lost, you patted the opposing team on the back and congratulated them.
Team spirit.
And you weren't punished for making an error. Everybody makes errors. And you were openly congratulated for the good stuff you did. Mm. That was a world that I did not experience. I didn't know what it was like ever to be congratulated for something I did that I thought was worth someone's attention. So baseball became my life, and it also became the arena in which I began to learn that I had some really good qualities and that I was talented in some ways. And it was a very safe place to be playing shortstop on a team because I knew my role. I got really good at it. And I knew the roles of everyone else on the field. And I knew that 3 outs and you're out. That's done. And you move on. And there's no uncertainty about it. And 3 strikes and you're out. And there's no uncertainty about that either. I learned my first lessons of the wonderful balletic rhythm of a double play and how working with 2 other guys on the field, we could perform a little miracle by turning a ground ball into this wonderful ballet. And I was feeling a level of passion and a sense of beauty, actually, from those times that I think were the groundwork for my passion in music that I have had for many years, classical music, a little bit of jazz. It turned on the part of me that allowed passion to be expressed unashamedly and to be felt unashamedly, even though it was rather chaotic at the time. I didn't know what to do with it. But it fertilized me into receiving all the seeds that life has to offer and wanted to plant in me for the future. And so I think, as Hamlet said, the readiness is all. I became ready and readier in those years that I wrote about in this Crazy Quilt. Ready to become me, ready to receive whatever information planted itself in me and wanted to hang around and grow. And in some way, even though I couldn't predict what it was going to grow into, I could feel it growing, and I knew it was a good thing. I didn't always understand it, but I trusted it. And I've trusted it ever since that when I feel that sense of evolving growth into some new aspect in my center core, I have no problem taking a risk in that direction because I know something speaking to me about, yeah, this is where you need to go next. So, when you're living life from young to old, things seem a bit chaotic, but when you look back, they all look like patterns, right? And they say, yeah, that was the right move. And yes, you had to go here. Otherwise, you never would have met that person or seen that thing or walked into a building in Florence that had a statue in it called David, and it was going to change your life. You got there, and you had to get there, even though you didn't know you did. And so my life has been a series of Davids, of encountering something that was going to alter me, that I at first could not comprehend, and then was so grateful that it existed and that it can exist in this world, and walked around it and around it, feeling myself shifting the whole time. So that's easier to see from old age backward. But that's kind of what I was sensing. And so the first half of Crazy Quilt is this coming of age story. So it begins at me being the little boy in Little Boy and trying to be seen and heard. And it goes to the end of my senior year in high school when I got my first car. And that's the scope of the first half of the book. Second half of the book, I got the courage to go back to my short stories, which are all about adult relationships and encounters, most of them failing. And I reignited them, resurrected them, and started polishing them up. And I had by that time written a lot more and got better. And so I have a bunch of stories that I call intersections. And the purpose behind the intersections, I began to realize, had to do with my sense that when two people come together, like you and I today, we've never had a conversation. But a sense that when two people intersect, a third thing is created. A third essence that never existed before. And that I wanted to put two people in a story who intersected and watch what happened in a whole bunch of different settings. And what happened was the lesson for me. What happened when the intersection occurred. Now, I remember reading about quantum physics and how we talk about electrons and neutrons and how no one's ever seen one. And that the only time quantum scientists know there's an electron in existence is when it collides with another element and lights up for a nanosecond. Mm-hmm. And in that nanosecond, they know something's there. Something has come from that intersection. And that thing often is the discovery of a precious element or a new thing in nature that's never been discovered before. And that's really what's behind intersections. It's the colliding of neutrons with other elements, lighting something up that both parties perhaps needed to learn or needed to see. And it needed to alter them if they were to go on with their lives. So those stories are all around that notion. And that's the second third of Crazy Quilt. And the last third of Crazy Quilt is called Brief Encounters. You remember that old movie?
Yes.
Betty Davis? I guess it was Betty Davis. Anyway, Brief Encounters is a collection of 4 dialogues. I decided to put 2 people together, have a conversation, and see where it goes. And so there are 4 of them. First one was about that guy that I told you about, that ex-policeman who sat down, and that's in 3 sections. And I love that piece. It's called I Only Came In for Coffee. Yeah. And then there's one called how have I forgotten the name of one of my pieces? Anyway, there's another one called Shakespeare Knocked at My Door. And that's about a man in his living room, and the door, there's someone knocks at his door, and it's Shakespeare. And he invites him in, makes him a cup of coffee, and they have a chat. And he's not sure if he could ask the question that is obvious at that point. It's like, so how are you here? You know, like, okay, so you're Shakespeare, that's obvious. But it's 2024. And oh, yes, he says at one point, I'm here, not sure how, but there are many of us around, just so you know, which I thought was a ticklish and juicy idea. And so I have a conversation. The one I can't remember the name of is when I was in England, I worked in 4 experimental schools in the Midlands. In one of them, I was at the time a fairly young man, and there was an older woman, maybe in her 60s, who would come into the school on a regular basis and teach whatever kids were interested in sewing. And there were a lot of takers. And it was a school of kids that would be kind of late elementary school age. And she was very interesting and lovely lady. And her husband would come in on alternate days and teach any kid that wanted to learn how to thatch a roof. Mm. Not that anybody is doing that anymore, hardly, but it was an art form. And he taught them how to do this and with even designs in the thatch work. Wonderful stuff. So I got to talking to this woman and found out that she had been teaching in London during the Blitz.
Wow.
So I had some conversations with her about that. And I wrote this dialogue between the man and this woman in which she talks about what it was like to be a teacher in the midst of rubble and dead bodies and no equipment and no supplies, and working at a half-destroyed warehouses and buildings that had a wall, picking up pieces of coal and cardboard to use to write.
Wow.
And whatever kids lived through the last bombing. Think about it. And I said to her, how did you manage to keep teaching? And she said, well, we were there and there were children. And that said it all.
Kept her going. And kept them going.
Yeah. And then she looked wistfully out the window and then looked back at me and said, those were the greatest teaching years of my life.
Mm.
I get that. Because I spent 20 years of my life as a teacher working with learning disabled and emotionally disturbed kids who almost all came from traumatic backgrounds. So I got that, that these kids were lost and nobody really wanted to be with them because they were mean and ugly and resistant, angry. So I spent 20 years with those kids running a school of all these kids who had been thrown out of high school but were too young to actually drop out of school. And so we worked with them. I hired teachers, and over 20 years, we graduated 80% of them.
Wow.
All of them wanted to drop out when they arrived at our door. And somehow or another, by using the techniques that I learned in England, we were able to individualize instruction in a way that we were having the kids tell us what the best way they learned was, and then adjusting our approach to them rather than have them adjust to us. very important. And it was the core of a lot of my workshop teaching, that we need to change, not them. We need to find out where they are. Many of my kids came to school hungry. Many of them came to school because they were, just had to leave little children that they were taking care of and actually raising.
Yeah. Because
parents were either alcoholics or drugged out or missing in action. And so a 14-year-old was raising 3 little siblings. And they come to school and we would say, what? You need to learn algebra. Really? In what world is that going to resonate? Yeah. We need to hear this. This doesn't make any sense. So we need to turn our attention around to them and say, who are they? Where are they coming from? And what do they most need now? And you know what the answer was in many cases? Breakfast.
Yeah.
So we had food. And we fed them. Because until you're fed, you can't learn. So I had 20 glorious years in that work because I learned personally tremendous amount about myself and about this whole world that we call education that was so wrong in so many ways.
I would imagine that if you would have been in the public school system.
I was. This was a portion of the public school system. And I ran workshops in that system, hoping that I could institute some amount of change. I may have changed some teachers because I know that they changed their ways in the regular system, but the system just doesn't move.
Yeah.
It's like making a fast turn in an ocean liner. You'll go 20 miles before it even begins to turn. It's so resistant to change. There's so many money factors running through the system that prevent common sense to take place. And so eventually I knew that my work, I needed to go elsewhere and do this work. So when I retired and left, I started taking this workshop around the country, and I was being hired in practically every state to work with principals and with teachers to at least get them interested in looking at the brain research and what it says about how the brain learns most naturally. This is something that there was a very large man that showed up midway through one of my workshops in, I don't know where, Seattle. And when the workshop ended that day, he came up to me. He was a menacing looking guy. I thought he was going to punch me. And he walked up to me, hovering over me. I'm not a very tall person. And he said, I've got a bone to pick with you. And I said, okay. And he said, you made me very uncomfortable, even a little angry. And I said, sorry. So he said, so I'll tell you why. He says, I've been in education for almost 40 years. I've been a superintendent for 20 of those years. And I never once in all those years thought about the human brain. And what you did today really pissed me off. Because it reminded me that the very thing that we were supposed to be teaching, I never gave a second thought to. And I'm angry with myself. Why didn't I meet you 20 years ago? Well, 20 years ago, none of us were paying a lot of attention.
Yeah, really. But he met you then.
Yes, but those moments of tumult in other people where they realize, of course, we're teaching the brain. What else are we teaching? Toes? Elbows? It's the brain. And we know nothing about it. We're just assuming things. We're assuming that our particular way of doing things is right because, I don't know what, feels right. So once we began to learn that the hardest way for the human brain to retain information is to give it to the brain in words only.
Right.
Okay. So let's suppose that's true. I happen to believe it is. Now take a walk down the hallway of any school and look in the windows and see what's happening. And you will find teachers giving words to kids who are writing words on pieces of paper, and they'll be tested on them at the end of the month or a week. And retention level after 48 hours is about 9%.
Yeah.
Okay? So now you get that information, and then you look at your classroom or your school or your district, and you say, what are we doing out there? And 90% of it is this thing that doesn't work really well. Now what? So I was dropping this bomb all over the country and saying, this is your school system. Here's the research. This is what we know now. Now you can't unknow this. So do with it what you will. Remember the kids. It's all about them. Not about organizations and PTAs and budgets and scheduling and buses. It's about them. Once you take your eyes off them, you're going to be in a losing game. So each of them has a brain which works this way, at least as far as we can tell. Now you have no excuse for doing the right thing. You either do it or you don't do it. And if it keeps you up at night, that's your problem. So that was kind of what I did for 12 years. It's just causing trouble all over the place.
Yeah, but influencing so many people.
I hope so. And
I'm sure.
I hope so. You know, I never go back to those places. So, you know, just coming in and dropping a bomb often isn't enough. But if someone grabbed a hold of it and said, let's look more, then maybe some things started happening that wouldn't have happened. I don't know. All I know is I did what I could. And I believed deeply in what I was doing at every second. And I didn't compromise with any of the resistance I got or the reasons that I was told we can't do those things.
Yeah.
I would say I'm not interested in the bus schedule. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I know you have to deal with these things, but primary in our conversation is not the bus schedule. It's not the convenience of your teachers and what time they come into work. You're bringing high school kids in at 7:30 in the morning and elementary school kids at 8:30 or 9. It's exactly the opposite of what we know about how the brain works. Adolescents need more sleep. They're functionless between 7 and 9. Go in any high school and go to first and second periods, and you'll see how absolutely robotic those kids are. They're not functioning yet. So we choose to bring them in early and the other ones in late. Well, it's exactly the opposite with elementary kids. Because they're up in the morning, they're ready to go.
Yeah.
Those are the ones we should be bringing in early. But all these things that we were discovering were at odds with what was going on.
Yeah.
And, you know, not only is it hard to change institutions, but there are a lot of egos out there who've committed themselves to these things that now have to say I was wrong. That's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard for everybody. So anyway, so that's the second book. Mm-hmm. Am I rambling too much? Okay.
I want to hear about your newest book, which is actually, I think,
it'll go to print
actually
today.
Coming out today or tomorrow.
I'm making a phone call as soon as I get off with you to start the presses going.
Wonderful.
Literally, last details were finished last night. So yeah.
The other side of
night. Yeah. Before I get to that, though, I have to get you to it because the books all lead somewhere. So the third book is called The Card Game. It's a one-act play. And the purpose in that was to resurrect all of my dead relatives. I went to the cemetery and got them up and brought them in for one last card game. It was a tradition in my family that all of the relatives, all Sicilians except my mother, would come to my mother's house. She was, as a non-Sicilian, the best Italian cook in the family. And that would be the Sundays. And Sundays would be 10 people around, uh, 5 or 6 of them playing poker, the men and one woman. And that would be something that happened before and then after dinner, midday meal was served. And it was a time that I sat at that table, not as a player, but as a, uh, guess, a 10-year-old boy watching and studying the faces and the behaviors of all these guys and women and the roles they were playing and how it was the same every week. The language was the same, the game was the same, the arguments were the same. The women were protesting about the same things, and uh, it was like a series on TV. Like you meet the same people and they keep doing the same stuff. And I was fascinated by all the personalities and all the pretensions and all the tough guy stuff and so forth. And I had an uncle who wanted to teach me how to play the game. And my mother, who was very religious, got very upset about that and didn't want me drawn into the world of poker and betting and sinful stuff. Not in her house, she would say. But it happened anyway. And I had a front row seat in that. So I wanted to write a play. I had never written one before. And I thought, well, if I get all these characters out of their graves just one more time and sat them around a table and got these women who at that time were nothing more than servants for the men. They ran around doing coffee and getting meals ready and cleaning stuff up. And that was the world that I grew up in. And the guys were the guys playing poker and being tough and talking like they knew the answers to everything. So um, I said, I'm going to get these folks back to the table. So I got them all out of their graves and invited them to have one last game. And so they did. And the card game is that game. And they play. And the way I fashioned the play is that on one level, it's a card game. And then one by one, each of the players and the women who are not playing, each of them have a moment or two. It's more than a couple of moments, which I call their arias. They get to sing alone, and no one can hear them except the audience. And they get to talk about who they really are and what's really going on and what they're really afraid of and what they really don't understand. And so all of them have an aria, except the little boy, who is me. His name is Ben. And so there's a crisis developing through the play in terms of one of the characters, one of the aunt, who is not well. And that is evolving through the play. But in the meanwhile, you get to see the game, which is kind of the superficial dance that guys are doing. And then you see the arias, which helps us look behind the scenes of their hearts and minds and see that many of them are confused and frightened and disappointed in life and really don't know what to do next and are suffering in many ways. They can't admit that in public. And it takes place in 1948, just after the war, not long after the Depression. So there are a lot of elements that come into it relating to those things. And historically, 1948 is a really big year in many ways. And they're living their little provincial lives at a time when the world was shifting in ways that they would never understand. So I got to hang out with all of them again, recreated them all. They all did their shtick. And then I got a chance to delve into what I thought was going on behind the scenes. Of course, that was all created. And then it was over, and they end in a in a Renaissance painting. They freeze into a Renaissance painting at the very end when the crisis is hitting. And they all take their positions and they're frozen, and you could frame it, put it on the wall, and it's over. That's the card game.
So I'm interested to know, like, your creative process in terms of, like, even thinking about resurrecting your dead relatives and then putting them at the end into a I mean, how do those ideas come to you? Do they just come through quiet times, right, just journaling, or like in the shower, or where do these creative ideas come from? Do you?
Yeah, that's a hard question. I
Yeah.
really can't fully answer that. Uh, I don't know that I have a process.
Mm-hmm.
I am a person who is writing and thinking about these things all the time. And more times than not, they don't materialize into anything. And sometimes they just start getting stuck together, and all of a sudden it looks like there's something. And I don't always know what that something is until I focus on it. But another part of what you might call a process, I never thought of it that way. Maybe it is. But I've told these stories many times in my life. The stories of the card games, the stories of my mom and her depression. I've told the stories of the antagonism that existed between uncles that seemed to go away once the card game was over. I had a crush on one of my aunts, and I told that story many times. I had another aunt who adored me and told me never to say ain't because it makes me look like an ignoramus, she used to say. All of these things were parts of stories, family stories that I had told for years. And so when the notion of the card game came to me, I thought, I know all those stories.
Mm-hmm.
I've told them dozens of times. What if I just put all those folks in the room again and tell the stories of their lives at that moment, given the Sunday afternoon in 1948, and hang out with them again one more time.
So maybe in a sense, it was a way of completing something within yourself too.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I did. Because I was part of it, although peripherally. I was a keen observer as a kid. I paid a lot of attention to what was going on around me because I felt in some parts of my childhood danger of rejection, of being judged. I was extremely astute, paying attention to all the signals that were going on. I knew when to leave my mother alone. I knew when she went in her bedroom and closed the door, there was another one of those things going on that I couldn't knock on the door and see her. I couldn't get to her or her love. I later on discovered she was depressive and hid away. It had nothing to do with me, but I thought as a kid it had something to do with me. I thought I was causing it actually. So, I had to be tuned in, like any prey animal, to that which is going on around me, because any one of those things could be life-threatening. So a child would think. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because when you're a kid, you're the center of the universe, right? Everything's about you. So,
And we don't have, other tools available to us yet.
right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. There was no way of analyzing it and understanding it. You were just reacting mostly from your right brain. You were just emotionally and your primitive brain for survival. And you did what you did to get by and stay safe. So as a result of that, maybe a fortunate result, I learned to be really good at paying attention. The end of this great play called was it The Salesman? Miller's play.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't, it's more than The Salesman. I can't.
Yeah, it's I can't think of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. At his gravesite, he's been away a lot doing his thing, and he's got two boys that grew up, didn't know him, didn't care much about him. His wife is left alone a lot. And at the gravesite, when his body is dropped into the hole and covered, and the two boys, kind of impatiently switching from leg to leg before they so let's get out of here. And the wife is standing there watching her life, her dead husband, who she spent very little time with, who was so busy doing his, sales stuff, and the boys who grew up really without him and had very few ethical standards. She looked at them and looked at the grave, and she stood in a loud voice saying, "Attention must be paid." And they looked at her like she was crazy. And she looked at them, piercing, and said, "Attention must be paid." She realizes at that moment that nobody's paying attention. They just be kind of moving along, going through life. And that struck me when I first saw that play. That was key for me, that I need to be paying attention and not let things just slip by as if they weren't important. So when I read the Joyce line that said everything is worth paying attention to, I said yes to that line. Yeah.
Death of a salesman.
Death of a salesman. Thank you. My memory for names is just
same here.
Yeah, it's awful. So we'll move on to the next book.
Sure.
Okay, next book was just sheer joy, called Marley's Brain. Marley's Brain came accidentally out of a short story I was playing around with. This young man is a little off the normal spectrum. I wouldn't so much call him autistic in any way, but he's certainly on that spectrum somewhere, in a place of intelligence combined with a certain curiosity about life and a need to make sense of it. And life, of course, hardly ever makes sense. He's looking for some elements of truth that keep evading him, and is confronting all of the aspects of life that cannot neatly be categorized and put in their places so he can understand. And so I introduced Marley, and in, I don't know how many chapters, it's a fairly short, it's a novella, take him through some experiences with religion, with sexuality, with a girlfriend, with learning about his passion for history and mathematics. And in every arena of his life, he confronts the unconfrontable, the business of life not wanting to settle itself neatly into a nice pattern. And he is a harmless, loving person, but curious as hell, and just continues to look for answers and can't ever find that there is one answer. Whether it's in his bookstore job, where all these historians are writing about history and from different angles, and he says to the owner of the store, "Well, which one of these books has got the truth in it?" And the guy says they all have parts of the truth in it, because it's about their perspective of what they're writing about. And this for Marley is like, really? And so Marley comes from the Marley from Dickens' Christmas Carol. And a lot of the characters' names in Christmas Carol are secretly, clandestinely filtered through the book. And Marley walks through his life curious about everything and always being a bit frustrated by life's inability to conclude anything finally, including his relationship with a girlfriend that he thinks a lot about, but just doesn't understand. And so it's fun. It's a gentle satire on life, because of Marley's state of mind and the way he looks at life, he can innocently ask questions that most of us don't want to ask because they may seem rude or sacrilegious or whatever. But he asks these questions in complete honesty. He just wants to know the answer. And people are often put off by it because they think he's playing games. But Marley doesn't play games. He doesn't know how. He just is curious. And like, how does holy water get holy? Is one of his questions. When the minister tells him it's what's this springs, something springs water, Poland Springs water that gets delivered to the church. And just as one example, Marley is fascinated with how Poland Springs in the storeroom of the church gets to be holy by the time it gets in the baptismal fount, which he is witnessing because he's at a baptism. The minister thinks he's having him on. And he really wants to know what happened. What did you do? Because everybody knows that's holy water. So, like, okay. So that's the tenor of the book.
Yeah. In
that moment is what everything that happens in the book is Marley trying to figure out, in all honesty, what's going on here. And I want to understand. And people are flustered because show me a minister or a priest who can actually answer that question. Okay? So that's the fun of it. And so I was having lots of fun with that book. And then I had actually started writing the novel before Marley, but it was not finished yet. So The Other Side of Night, probably my last work, I think. Might be my last work. That's sad.
Why is that?
Well, because I'm not going to live forever, so I may not have the time to do another one, but I'm 89.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not ignorant of reality. I'm in pretty good shape now, but, tomorrow show can change completely.
Right.
So I'm doing what I can while I can,
Mm-hmm.
and something new may happen. It might be possible. But right now, The Other Side of Night captures for me a kind of life and love and loss story, all of which is drawn from real experiences, but fictionalized, so that I was actually a writer doing this, not a biographer. But I wanted all of the juice for this novel to come from real fruit and not made up stuff. Nothing comes from nothing. So I drew on all of the hot spots of my life, all of the times when everything shifted. When the loss of my first wife, her cancer, shifted. And so many other experiences of loss and discovery and terrible mistakes, bad judgments, and then recovering from them, learning from them, hopefully. And what I wanted to accomplish, to put it succinctly, what happens when people get together in midlife, successful people, intelligent people, having come from histories of trauma. And these people want to make a beautiful, healthy life from their love that lasts. And yet there are ghosts in the background that are haunting them. And these ghosts must be encountered and must be faced. They must be understood in order to learn something and then bring health and joy and love to this relationship so that it can last. It wants to have legs, but we get crippled by our past often and we don't even know it. We get hijacked by the things that we had not really come to grips with or resolved or even admitted.
Mm-hmm.
So I had lots, and Terry had hers. And I thought, well, I want to build a book that makes it possible for those two people to deal with these issues and to survive and to find the fullness of love in spite of them. Now, the stories have very little to do with actually our lives specifically, but they have the juice of our lives in them, the juice of our losses and the juice of our pain and the juice of our joys. And so I have the reader, the book begins at the end. The end of the book is the first chapter. So you meet these folks in old age, and then you meet them when they met. And then the journey goes from there. And I wanted the reader to see that that love is not the first thing that happens. Love is the result of a lot of hard work, and that we need to learn how to love, and we need to do the work that results in love. That lust and passion come early in the game, but love is the end result of hard work and dedication and honesty. And I wanted the reader to go through that process of how these two people, both lovely people who are intelligent, but also in many ways bogged down in unanswered questions from their past, and to take them on the journey of discovery. So the book is a love story, but it's also a couple of mysteries because things need to be solved. And so each of them has to solve their own mystery, and they help each other do that. So it's a mystery. It's also a story of loss and found. It's not funny. This is the book I'm reading right now. Can you see it?
Lost and Found?
Yeah.
Lost.
Why is it so blurry?
Yeah.
It's called Lost and Found. I just thought of that. But this is a journey from that takes the couple to a place where a healthy relationship and the fullness of love can happen now because the ghosts have been understood and managed.
And willing.
Yeah.
Willing and open, right?
Yes. Yes.
To see them.
Yeah. Yeah. And the ghosts never go away completely, but they can be managed. And so the book is about that journey, which is painful and beautiful and fun. There's a lot of food in the book and meals that they share in detail. I love to cook, and so I poured my passion for food into this. I love to travel, and so this couple does travel, and there's always discoveries to be made about who they are by way of food and also by way of traveling that incrementally helps them eventually find the courage to solve their own mysteries, get the answers that they need to get, and then learn to live with them. So the other side of night, of course, is daylight. So our couple comes from darkness into the light in this roundabout way that I've written it. And hopefully at the end, you see them in old age having found a way to live with that without losing the precious opportunity of sharing love in this world and sharing with others as well.
Sounds beautiful. And all your books are available on Amazon, and
they are becoming available as we speak. Marley's Ghost is available on Kindle right now. It will be available in softcover. The person who's managing things for me is uploading Crazy Quilt, which should be finished today, onto Amazon. And next will be The Other Side of Night, and then following that will be the play, and then Everyday Epiphanies. So probably within the next couple of weeks, everything will be on Amazon and on bookshop.com. And I have a website that the books can be purchased on.
Right.
All of that's being pieced together now because I don't have the skills. And,
Yeah.
um,
That's not where your genius lies.
I don't do any of that. So I found a young woman who was amazing and who just loved the book, loved the book, and got off on this crusade to get everybody to find my books. And
that's
I'm
wonderful.
so grateful for her because
Yeah.
she can actually do it. I mean, she knows how to do these things.
Yes.
So I just gave her a total freedom. Like, just do it. Here's all the stuff. And any way I can help, just let me know. And so she is. And we're hoping to have a live launching event at Trails End. Do you know Trails End?
Yes. In Greenwood.
Stacy's a good friend of mine, and she's been after me to do something there. And I didn't know quite what to do. And so when the book is actually materialized into a physical book, this woman who's helping me is going to put together an event where I had 7 pre-publishing readers of the book. I gave my book to 7 people who were serious readers. And I said, read this book and let me know whether it's any good. And they read it, and each of them wrote a review of the book, which will be in the book.
Yeah.
And so they're going to be invited to this event because they've read the book. And then the public is going to be invited, and all of us are going to just have an evening conversation about the book and what people may ask about it and what these people have to say since they've read the book. And we'll have a pile of the books there for people to buy if they want to.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, that'll happen maybe in the fall. But anyway, that's kind of where we're at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have all of your social media handles and your website and everything in the show notes, so people could reach out to you even by email if they're interested, and if the books are not out yet or they want to attend the event. But I have one question for you as we wrap up today. First of all, I want to thank you so much. I was practically in tears several times during the conversation because you touched me in a very deep way. My heart, your vulnerability, and your just, I think your ability to, your perspective. And I think it's very needed. And it was a very deep conversation for me, and I really enjoyed it. And I thank you for being here. My last question to you would be, what do you think is the biggest gift that you have received from, I'm just going to maybe put this more into being an author, because you are so much more than that. Of course, to me, you're a philosopher, you're an educator, you're a coach. But what has been the biggest gift of writing all these books for you personally?
The coaching that I do is called Conversations That Matter, which really says it all for me. All my writing is a part of my side of the conversation. And what I yearn for more than anything is to complete the circle of the conversation, where my writing leads to a conversation like you and I had today, where we can talk about these things. So the greatest gift, hard to say, I've had so many wonderful gifts in my life, but I mean, Terry is the number one gift. In many ways, her energy and love has made all this happen, because it's all happened since we're together. But the books that I write, and particularly the last one that we were just talking about, are constructed in the cycle. The last chapter, the first chapter, is the last chapter.
Right.
So when it ends, we are at the last chapter again. So the book's a circle. When you see the cover of the book, there's a wonderful, abstract, beautiful, provocative cover done by Kate Leon. You know Kate Leon,
Yeah.
who used to be
Oh,
president.
yes,
So
absolutely.
she's a graphic designer. She's done all my covers. She's wonderful. And I just spilled my guts about what this book is about to her and said, make me a cover that says this. I don't know how you're going to do this. And she did. And it shows the darkness going into light and all the passionate colors in it. But it's built on an implied yin-yang structure so that the black and the white are counterbalanced with elements of both in each, as you know. And so the end of the book leads the reader right back to the first chapter in a circle. And Conversations That Matter is about that. It's about us completing the circles of our potential together, where we each contribute stuff, and without us realizing it, we always take the past and we bring it into the present, and then we return to the past again. But as Eliot said in one of his great poems, we return to a place we knew well and see it for the first time. And that's what makes me happy. That's my blessing, is getting back to what I knew and seeing it for the first time.
Yeah.
It's everything.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dick. It's been really a pleasure and an honor speaking with you and having this conversation, getting to know you.
Yeah.
Having more
Just
people.
you walking your dog all the time.
Yes.
You wave.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think people are really going to enjoy this interview. And, some writers out there that perhaps, are maybe thinking they're not worthy or, are hesitant to really put their work out there. I know it's going to be inspiring because after all, you developed all of this body of work starting in your 80s, which is beautiful and amazing. And I know that someone out there is going to be inspired by this conversation, not only for that reason, but, for many others. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much, Dick, for your beautiful conversation today. And I just want to thank the audience for tuning back in. Some of the works that are published are Everyday Epiphanies, Crazy Quilt, Marley's Brain, and Other Curious Tales, The Card Game, and his forthcoming novel, The Other Side of Night. And this is going to be actually out by the time this podcast is launched, so you can go to Amazon or his website. All his contacts are in the show notes. And I want to, again, ask you to please support this podcast by sharing this episode if you feel it will benefit someone. There are writers out there that perhaps are, overthinking and have something to say and share with the world. And perhaps this will inspire them. So again, thank you so much, Dick, and to all the listeners. And I want to remind everyone to review the show. We would really appreciate that. And you can download a free gift. You can go directly to my website, franmedinacoaching.com, or you can just download it from the show notes and you'll receive a free gift on tools that will help calm anxiety instantly. And we can all use that right now. And you will be subscribed then to my email list. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.